welcome to Graywood Gardening. Today I am finally going to be building the raised beds to go here in the veggie garden area now that we have the 8-foot deer fence up. And I figured, since I'm going to be out here working all day, it's the perfect time to finally burn up the brush and branches that I'd cut down last year and early this year. Now, I'm pretty certain I know what I'm going to do for the raised beds. I know I want it to be 2 boards high, and I know I want a 2x4 rim along the top that you can sit on. And Mrs. Graywood has requested that the framework, the uprights for the bed, actually be on the outside of the bed, so the inside of the garden bed is the smooth part. So not a lot of wiggle room in there. Hopefully this will go pretty quickly and pretty easily. We'll find out.
Sets you free. Believe in only you. Yesterday is gone. Forget about tomorrow and the ceilings you see right through. Find the moment and make it. Write your headline and raise it. Inside a prison view, 10 whispers or a shout, gunpowder if it's true, smoke before the fire, no one else can slay the dragon sleeping inside of you.
Alright, the first raised bed is done. There's really no wrong way to build a raised bed. I've built them several different ways in the past. In this instance, we went with untreated pine, only because cedar is so insanely expensive. But I used 2x material instead of 1x, which is going to make sure that this lasts much longer, probably at least 10 years. This is 2 2x8s in height, within a 2x4 lip on top to sit on. It makes it a comfortable sitting height. It's really convenient for reaching in for planting and weeding and harvesting. And very important for us, because we're on top of pure sand, this is going to give us a good volume of dirt for all of our plants to grow in. This bed is 10 feet long by 4 feet wide. I've got the vertical 2x4s here that serve 2 purposes. They obviously hold the 2x8s together, but they also support the lip of the 2x4, so there's no sagging. And finally, I did add 1 2x4 across the middle because this 10-foot stretch is pretty long. That will help hold it together so that when it's full of dirt, it doesn't bow outward slowly over time. Well, it is unfortunately almost time for dinner, and I only got 1 bed done today. I feel like I spent more time tending to the fire than I did building anything. Although I did get through, probably 2/3 or 3/4 of the brush, so I should be able to finish that off pretty easily tomorrow. I have enough lumber to make 6 or 7-ish of these raised beds, but I'm not sure if I'm going to make them all 10 feet long. I might make some a slightly different size. I need to talk it over with Mrs. Graywood and get some idea of what the beginning of the configuration of space in here is going to be before I build all of them. But hopefully over the next couple days I can use up all that lumber, and then it's just a matter of sliding these into place and getting some garden soil. Alright, more to come soon. We have a chance of rain today, so I'm going to try to get as much work done as possible, either in the garage or just outside of the garage. My goal for today is to build at least one more 10-foot bed and at least one 4-foot by 4-foot bed, because I want to see what that looks like. And I think we're going to want a couple of those dotted throughout the veggie garden area. Okay, so that should be the walls for one more 10-foot by 4-foot bed and a 4-foot by 4-foot square bed, because I kind of want to see what that looks like. Now they just need to get assembled, and I need to get the top 2x4s on. Welcome back to the seed starting layer. While I'm building the raised beds in the veggie garden area, it's also time to start hardening off all of the seedlings I have starting down here. And all of these guys are way overdue for getting planted out. We have a whole bunch of pumpkins and cantaloupe and watermelon here that we're super excited about, because Mrs. Graywood and I have never grown these before. We've never had the space for these big sprawling vines. Now, the advice for these is that you should seed them directly in the ground, but they also have a really long time to maturity, and we knew we wouldn't have the garden ready till mid-June, so we had to get them started inside, so hopefully these guys work out. In addition, I've got a ton of basil here that's doing wonderfully. It's a tad leggy, but it's still doing good. It's been pinched off once, it's ready to get pinched off again. I have a bunch of tomato plants that are very, very much ready to get planted out. But what I really wanted to show you is the peppers. Peppers that we planted way back at the end of March are doing just fantastic. They're huge and lush and dark green, also full of flowers and even starting to grow some little peppers, which is not ideal. And in addition to this, we have plenty more peppers where those came from. I think there's a whole nother tray of peppers here as well. So we should be doing good on peppers this year. So the idea behind hardening off the seedlings is that they've been growing in this ideal, perfect environment for their whole life. And if you were to take them and plant them outside right now, they very likely, most of these would die. They would get all shocked and droopy, their stems would snap in the wind because they've never had to contend with wind before, so they've never had to grow strong stems. So the idea is we take them outside for just a little bit and then bring them back in. And you take them out for longer and longer periods every day until they get toughened up and they can handle the outside world. There's no single way to harden off plants. Everybody does things slightly differently. The general framework is that you should harden your plants off over the course of about a week. It is worth noting the more mature your plants are, the more sensitive they're going to be and the longer the hardening off process is going to be. Like lettuce seedlings, for example, that you really grow inside for only about 3 weeks, they harden off pretty quickly. Whereas things like the tomatoes and these peppers are definitely going to need the full week to get hardened off. So the way that I do it is I take them outside for just 2 hours on the first day. Then each subsequent day, I leave them out for 1 hour more. Obviously, sometimes I forget about them and they stay out longer, but that's the goal. The first 3 days that I take them out, I do not let them get exposed to any direct sunlight at all. I put them in a shady and sheltered spot. And then on the 4th day, I let them get a little bit of direct sun and a little bit more and a little bit more. A couple of things to keep in mind when you're hardening off your seedlings is, first of all, they will use a lot more water when they're outside than they do when they're inside. Because once they're contending with the warmer temperatures, the wind, the direct sun, they're going to transpire a lot more water through their leaves, which means they're going to suck their pots dry much faster. So it's a very good idea to make sure that everything is well watered before it goes outside. Obviously, don't water it if it doesn't need it, but if it's remotely a question, water it before it goes out. The other thing is just to keep an eye on the plants when they're outside. Check on them a couple of times. If the leaves start getting droopy, that means it's time to bring them in, give them a little water. They'll perk right back up. That's part of the process. In fact, sometimes I leave them out much longer than I was planning to because I go to bring them in and everyone's looking fine and perky. That'll often happen like if it's been a cloudy day and there's been no direct sunlight, and then they're like, woohoo, we're doing great. So then I'll just leave them out longer. But yeah, if anything starts to droop, bring it inside. That's the point of the hardening off process. And then after about a week, the plants should be strong enough to get planted outside, and then they can really start to grow. All right, let's get these guys out. I think the weather is punishing me for taking too long to get this done. It is now in the 90s, so I'm not sure how much progress I'm going to make. I did put as much together as I could in the garage before coming out here in the sun, but now it's time to start assembling more boxes. Ugh. Another day on the raised bed project. Today, instead of sun and 90 degrees, we have upper 80 degrees and humidity and rain. We already had one downpour this morning. Should have several hours before the rain starts in earnest later this afternoon. So I'm going to try to get a little bit of work done. And by the way, I am not hardening off the plants today because it could rain at any time. So I think what I'm going to do now is I have enough of these 10-foot raised beds built that I can lay out the very first row. It's a little tricksy because we have this fence at the back on the side that is not at a 90-degree angle. It's actually opening out that way. And I think we want to make the beds perpendicular to the back fence wall, which kind of means we need to mostly eyeball it to make that happen. We want to have a 3-foot spacing in between all the garden beds so we can get a wheelbarrow in. And I think I'm going to fill the very bottom of the beds with wood chips, mostly just as a cheap filler material. And we also want to wood chip the path in between. Against this fence, we're actually going to build like a 3-foot bed in the ground where I think we're going to be planting raspberries along the fence line. So there won't be a raised bed there. All right, let's see how this works. Alright, well, it looks like the rain is about to show up and I got a bunch of cleaning up to do before it does. But I got the 4 main large beds in. This is pretty much our first row here. I still got about 2 or 3 more beds to put together and then set up a second row down there. So still another day or two's worth of work before we can start planting. I should mention that I'm very happy with these 4-foot by 4-foot beds, although they are a less efficient use of space because of the paths between them, and it takes more lumber to get the same square footage of growing area. So I don't think I'll have a lot of them, but I will have a few because they do have their uses, and one of the first uses I plan to use these for is to plant mint in one of these 4-foot by 4-foot beds. Mint, spearmint, peppermint is a perennial. It spreads really aggressively via runners. I've had mint in like big raised beds before, where I spent all summer ripping up runners and ripping out plants as it spreads into everything around it. So having it nicely contained in a 4-foot by 4-foot raised bed seems like a great solution. I could also see having a few of these dotted throughout the veggie area with flowers planted in them to help attract pollinators into the veggie garden to begin with. Alright, well, I think we're going to end this video here. I'm going to go ahead and use up the last of the lumber building the last couple of beds, and next time we will finally plant the veggies in the veggie garden about a month later than I should have. Alright, until then, happy gardening.